For the last 3 months, there have been fears in the West that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine. It all began last November when satellite images began showing Russian troop movements close to the border with Ukraine. Now, President Putin denied planning an invasion, but he has written publicly about how he sees Russians and Ukrainians as one people. He also wants to block Ukraine from ever joining NATO. Now, this led Western powers to bolster NATO's eastern flank here and threaten severe economic sanctions against Russia if it invaded. And there the matter largely stayed. But there have been suggestions in recent days that the crisis is coming to a head. Here's the Prime Minister.
This is probably the most dangerous moment, I would say, in the course of the next few days, in what is the biggest security crisis that Europe has faced for decades.
So why is he saying that? Well, primarily because Russian troop numbers have continued to rise. For some time, it was estimated there were about 100,000 troops around Ukraine's borders. With newer units arriving now, that estimate has risen to 130,000. Russia has also been moving thousands of troops into Belarus here to the north for what it says are military exercises. Exercises taking place just a few hundred miles from the capital city of Ukraine, Kiev. The US also says it has intelligence suggesting military action is likely, including the way Russia is configuring its forces and planning false pretexts for invasion. The truth is that no one really knows what Vladimir Putin intends. But on Friday, the White House issued a stark warning.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it.
The bottom line is that the reason some Western policymakers believe the crisis is coming to a head is not because Russia is failing to de-escalate, it's because it's actually escalating a crisis. All the while, diplomacy is failing to bear much fruit.
So, James, is an invasion now looking inevitable?
Well, the only person who really knows the answer to that question is Vladimir Putin. Certainly, the US intelligence is very pessimistic. You know, they think invasion is very possible. They think there's plans for it to happen. But nobody at the moment is saying it's inevitable. I'll point to a couple of things. One is, one of the reasons why the US is being so open about its assessment is to actually get it all out there, to almost deter an attack by calling out President Putin and saying, look, we know what you're doing, so that if there is any false pretext for a conflict, the US have anticipated it. The other thing to say is there's a lot of diplomacy going on. Lots of calls between world leaders yesterday, more to come. The new German Chancellor is going to Moscow on Tuesday, and they've got a lot to talk about. There's this thing called the Minsk Agreements, which were the unsuccessful deals signed back in 2014 and 15 to try and get a ceasefire and a political settlement in eastern Ukraine. Now, they failed. The fighting continues. But there's a hope maybe that's a route out. It's disputed. It's convoluted. Some people fear this could be a way of blocking Ukraine ever becoming a member of NATO by giving those enclaves, those pro-Russian enclaves, too much of a say in foreign policy. That might be the source of the comments from Ben Wallace saying there's a sense of Munich. But others say, look, it might be a route out, so let's at least talk about it. One little note of optimism. If you looked at social media in Ukraine yesterday, all the talk was not about invasion, but actually their contender for the new Eurovision Song Contest. So there's, as Clive was saying, there's still that gap between perception there and the threats and the dire warnings from elsewhere.
James Landale, thank you.